coming home, I'm coming home. Tell the world I'm coming.
Fate Masters are charismatic firebrands who weave plots and illusions to ensure their enemies' annihilation. Their cursed glaive carves through flesh and metal with unnatural ease, while the loyal Twist-Wing familiar provides them with an unimpeded view of the battlefield. Hello there and welcome to this paint guide all about painting a military mastermind of the Arcanite cults, a Fate Master. I'm really excited about this one, so let's waste no time and jump straight into it. All the paints we'll need are on screen now. Feel free to mix and match these with whatever you like. And the same is true for all the brushes and extra equipment that we'll be using in today's video. So before we get started, our mini needs an undercoat, and I've gone with Grey Seer Spray. This sets us up perfectly because we'll be using some contrast paints, and there's also quite a few bright colours on this mini, like inside the cloak, which would be quite tricky to base coat over a dark undercoat. But by all means, use whatever undercoat is right for you. Right, with that all out of the way, let's start base coating. Use Abaddon Black to base coat the eye sockets, back of the cloak, staff, collar trim, a tabard, and this super cool looking bird's beak. This creature is actually called a Twist-Wing, and often soars above the battlefield, relaying information to the Fate Master. With that picked out, let's switch to a small dry brush and carefully pick out the top of this horn like so. Looks great! Don't worry if it is a little messy at this stage, we're painting over pretty much all of these areas later anyway. Let's move on. Up next is Runelord Brass for the trim. We're doing this before the inner section of the armour to make it much easier to paint. This basically just means that we don't need to be as neat later. We'll need several thin layers of this, but just take your time and work your way through it. And once again, when you're done, don't worry about tidying up any mistakes yet. We can do that later after our other base coats have been applied. With the trim base coated, now it's time to shade it all, and we're going to be doing this using white thin flesh shade. Same again here, doing this now means we haven't got to worry about accidentally getting this onto the armour later. With that done, let's go back to base coating. Next we're going to pick out the inside section of the cloak, the rock on the base, scroll on the back of the mini, the small chest gem, the inside section of the collar, and all the runes on the staff using Corax White. You'll probably have to tidy up this part later with Abaddon Black once you're done, but that's totally fine. We'll need several thin layers of this, but thanks to our white undercoat, it won't be too many. Cool, now it's time to base coat the armour. We'll be painting it with contrast paint later in order to achieve that awesome metallic look that we see on the box art. So first, let's apply lead belcher. If you don't want this metallic effect, you can skip the stage entirely and just apply the contrast paint later over the undercoat. You'll obviously just need to tidy it up first. But with that said, if you are applying lead belcher like me, be extremely careful around the trim. And once you're done, you can then base coat the staff blades and the chainmail. With that done, we can now use Norm Oil to shade all the silver sections other than the armour. So that's the blade and the chainmail as well. And when that's dry, next let's layer over certain parts of the armour using Iron Breaker. So basically here we're just picking out areas that we want to appear brighter underneath the contrast paint. So on the raised areas and any edges. Build this up in thin layers to create a smooth colour transition. With that done, we're nearly ready to apply the contrast paint over the top. But first, let's apply some Stormhost Silver as an edge highlight. Be as careful as you can, but don't worry if you make any mistakes. You can always go back to lead belcher or Iron Breaker to neaten up your highlights. And while we've got this on our palette, we can also highlight all the other metallic areas on the mini. You can edge highlight the trim and dry brush the blade, but it's up to you how you go about it. With that out of the way, now it's time for some contrast paint. I'm going to be using Achelian Green mixed with a tiny amount of Lamia Medium to base coat the armour. This will create that really cool coloured metallic effect. Allow the first layer to fully dry, and then we can go back and apply a second layer. And after that's dry, you can apply a third layer in select areas if you want to take it a little further. Once you're finished and happy with the armour, we can also use this on some other areas of the mini. Thin it down even further and apply it to the inside section of the cloak and the runes on the staff. And with that done as well, we now have this really cool metallic effect on the armour, and some other blue areas starting to creep up across the model. And once again, if you don't like this effect on the armour, you could instead apply Achelian Green over the top of a non-metallic base coat, like Grey Seer. Right, before we move on, let's apply some thinned Achelian Green to the Twist-Wing. It's important that we do this at the last stage, because we're going to do some wet blending. I'll start with the tail first, just because if we paint the whole Twist-Wing, paint will dry before we have time to add any extra colours. So while the Achelian Green is still wet, let's add some athematic blue towards the middle section of the tail. This will blend together naturally like so. And then while they're both still wet, I can add small amounts of Blood Angel's red at the base of the tail. And once you're happy with the tail feathers, move on to the rest of the twist wing, focusing on adding these extra colours to the base of the wings. And with that dry, we have this neat blended effect on the twist wings feathers. To finish it off, apply Crichatchi Violet mixed with a small amount of Lamia Medium over the entire twist wing. We can also add this to the bottom section of the larger blade on the staff, the gem in the centre of the mini, and then this flame section on the waist. If it's too subtle, go back and apply a second layer. We're making real progress with our Fate Master now. Now we can use Graces to tidy up the horns ready for some contrast paint, as well as dot the twist wing's eyes. And then once that's dried, we can go back to athematic blue to colour the twist wing's eyes. Right, let's paint the horns using Skeleton Horde mixed with some Lamia Medium. This is a really cool detail on the Fate Master. Extra points if you notice that these horns have actually been shaped to resemble the icon of Tzinch. Once the first layer has dried, go in and apply a second layer over the bottom section to make it a little darker. And with that done, there are only a few extra bits to paint before we call our model finished. The main one being all the skin, which is going to be first base coated with several thin layers to kiss their flesh. You may have noticed there's actually quite a lot of exposed skin on this miniature, and there is a reason for this. Fate Masters are clad in a revealing suit of armour, and that's because they can predict their enemies' attacks and weave out the way of harm before a strike is thrown. Pretty awesome if you ask me. But anyway, with the skin all base coated, now we can move on to shading it. To shade all the skin, let's use some thinned down Guilliman flesh. This is a really nice, quick and easy recipe for painting skin. With that dry, we're nearly at the end now. First, let's highlight all the black sections using Dark Reaper. Be as careful as you possibly can, but remember you can always go back with Abaddon Black and tidy up any mistakes. At this point, as an optional stage, we can add some colour to the cloak with some thinned down Crichatchi Violet. Lightly glaze it on the lower quarter of the cloak like so. And at this point, you can also add it to some other areas if you want to, like the chainmail on the front of the mini. And to take it even further, we can thin down some Achelian green and lightly apply this to the upper section of the cloak. So just the very top like so. And you can also add this to the very top of the blade like I am here. And with that finished, all that's left is to finish off the base. So shade this piece of rubble using Norn Oil and some Lamia Medium. Then apply the texture paint of your choice. I'm using Armageddon Dust. I'm then shading it with Agrex Earthshade, dry brushing it with Screaming Skull, and painting the rim using Steel Legion Drab. And there we are, this Arcanite commander of the Disciples of Tzinch is ready to weave complex schemes to outwit his opponents on the battlefield. Arm outstretched like a puppet master pulling the strings. Well, that's all from me. Thanks for tuning in to this paint guide. If you're looking for more tutorials, tips and tricks, you can check out some of the other videos on the Warhammer YouTube channel, or alternatively you can head to a Warhammer store where our friendly staff are always happy to help. Thanks again for watching, see you next time, bye bye!
Круто. Ну, на этом все. Всем пока. Обязательно поставь лайк, подписку, колокольчик. Не скучай. И отдыхать. Всем пока. Получается, следующее видео будет на канале 9 января, 9 февраля. Всем пока. До зустрічі.